Initially, it'll be. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you today again. We are just back from the Wise Traditions Conference, the annual conference of the Weston A. Price Foundation. It was a fantastic conference. I didn't get to hear many talks because I'm working, but the energy, the joy to be together, the appreciation, the gratitude for everyone who puts these shows on, and it's just fabulous to be together, and everyone enjoyed it very much. Today's interviewee was also there with me, and actually she won the Integrity of Science Award. Am I right?
I think it was activism.
Okay. Yep.
We're working with Kay.
I'll bring you on since I'm asking. I was going to introduce you a little bit more and bring you on, but hey, because I couldn't remember. I remember thinking that you should get the Integrity in Science Award for all of the work that you've just done on this topic. And yours is actually the only talk that I got to hear. Not all the way through, but most of the way.
Good.
So I'm glad. But Mandy, thank you for being with us. We've interviewed you before, and so a lot of our viewers have already seen that. But if you want to just give a brief little synopsis of who you are and what you do, that would be lovely.
Okay. I'm coming at a different angle today as a clinical nutritionist. Basically, the reason this happened is because I studied nutrition, and everybody in my cohorts wanted to look at warfarin, and you look at different drugs and what their indications are and what their nutrient depletions are. And I said, can I study marijuana? It's a hot topic. It has a lot of gaps in perception and evidence-based information. So my professors let me. So I don't know if I like being the marijuana girl, but it's something that I think needs to be discussed, and it needs to be discussed more from a scientific, evidence-based principle, so that the emotions are not, controlling the discussion. And that's kind of how I got into this discussion and working with it with foster kids, obviously, and then my own child with autism. So that's how this, as a clinical nutritionist, that's how this relates.
Yes. Okay, good. And we've been waiting patiently for you to give this talk at the Wise Traditions Conference so that we could have you on to talk about it, because it is super important. And as we go through all of the things that we're going to talk about, we will bear in mind that this is controversial, that everyone may not agree on either side. Right. As to the validity or again, emotions may rule, and we want to not let emotions rule. I am going to let you start with presenting the information that you have, and I'll be asking questions along the way. But one thing I will put right up front, I think it's important that we recognize what God gives us.
Yeah.
And we can really screw things up. We can mess with them biologically. We can mess with things by overuse, by misuse. But just as some things like eating are good and necessary and needed, we can overindulge in that. We can overindulge in a lot of things. So with that said, probably everybody listening has some idea of where my mind goes with this. But I'm really super careful with what I would say or what I embrace. And so to hear your viewpoint is very important to me, and to share that.
Thank you.
So, yeah, and you've got so much knowledge and experience working with foster care kids and working within the system. You've seen a lot of wreckage of people's lives from the abuse of drugs, whether they're man-made or natural.
Right.
And so
food. Being a nutritionist, I see how people can abuse food, and they don't eat good foods either. So it all ties together because God creates the plants. He creates the, like you said, all of these things, and which is why we love Wise Traditions and Weston A. Price Organization, because it's all about the sourcing of the food and getting it from a local farmer and getting it clean and getting it right. And that applies to food and it applies to marijuana. And so
Yep.
as I dug into this, I was blown away with the information. And just like you can find evidence that tells you how bad meat is, and when you dig into that and call the
Yeah.
authors of the studies, you'll find that that meat has been crammed together, closed up, antibiotics shot up, synthesized, and not treated well, doesn't get sunshine. And I think what I'm finding is the same with marijuana, is that corporations are getting involved and it's getting messed up, and it's, and things are happening that really shouldn't happen. So I want to have a very evidence-based scientific conversation around it, to where, we figure out how it's working within our body and outside of our body, and what's happening with all of this. So I'll go through as you ask questions, because there's a lot of information.
There is. Well, first, we're going to bring this slide up, and you can expand upon this.
Okay, good. Let me use my glasses so I can see that. That slide is very, very interesting to me. And this was the one that blew me away, because you never realize how powerful marketing is until you see a slide like this, where you can see the marketing on this. We have talked so much about how bad it is to smoke cigarettes and how bad it is to drink, that drinking and smoking are marketed, that they're right up there in line with cocaine and heroin. And it blew me away, because that just shows you perception and marketing, how much they go together and how they correlate. Because cocaine, as we all should know, cocaine, ecstasy, and heroin, all those things are much more sensitive and much more harmful. Methamphetamines, much more harmful than, a glass of red wine, or, smoking a cigarette, which, is not great for you either, but it shouldn't even be on the same plane. So that shocked me in looking at that public perception and how effective marketing is.
Yeah. Wow. And it shows how much public perception has changed in recent years. So,
and
wow.
this only goes to 2013, but I find it interesting if you'll look, because it's hard to find current data. But if you'll look on cannabis, which is the third dot in, it's the only one that's right there the same, and I find that very unique, because people don't know. They're not sure where to go with the cannabis. And I think that we're going to elucidate that a little bit more today and talk through it, because, just like food, people say red meat is bad for you, but it depends on what red meat you get. If you get good source from local farmers that's been out in the sunshine, it's great for you. It's anti-inflammatory. But if you get, the CAFO continually fed, it's not. So I think that may be the problem with cannabis, is people are not sure, is it better? Is it good for you or bad for you? Like they put the two together. And so source is important.
That brings up an important point, that being that there is the weed that people grow in their backyards. Mm-hmm. And then there's the refined, enhanced, the shatter, and the vaping, and this and that, and other things, which are much more powerful. Right. And of course, people have hybridized to the point that there's much more psychoactive THC factor in today's cannabis than there was when I was in high school and smoking with friends.
And we'll show that in one of the slides that I've sent to you. But one of the things I do want to say is, full disclosure, I have never tried it. And, at first I thought that made me, can I really talk about this? But I've had enough people now, especially at the Wise Traditions Conference, say, no, that we actually think that makes you more objective in this discussion. Because I tried very diligently to get it for a foster child that had cancer. We were in the hospital, and it wasn't legal in 2010, 11, 12, 13, and 14. And morphine keeps these kids in the pediatric oncology floor, keeps them in another 3 to 4 days, because you have to wean off of the morphine. But if you're on cannabis, you don't have to go through that weaning process, that you can just get out of the hospital. So I fought really, really hard to get that for him, unsuccessfully. But the patients after him, they're now giving it. So,
Good.
you think you get frustrated with the battles you have, and you may not get it for your purpose, but now it's available to others. So
Yeah.
there is a place for these things. And I think that's where, I want to have that discussion and kind of go through that dialogue. And then for my autistic son, there's a lot of us with special needs kids that it works great for, and a lot of us that it doesn't. And then,
Yeah.
when you have the conversation, I want to acknowledge there's a lot of moms out there where their children are misusing it, because there's a problem also with no defined dosage on it. That is a major problem. So you get a vape, like you said, or you get an edible and you just take it, you don't feel it, you do it again. So that comes to, taking it vaping through the lungs, you're going to get a faster result. Taking it through the digestive process, it takes an hour or so to affect you. But generally, the population doesn't understand or put that together. So kids are taking more than they should. And so
Yeah.
they're having problems, they're getting depressed, and we'll kind of go through the evidence with that information as well.
Yeah.
So,
And generally, I know we'll get to this, but we definitely would agree that recreational use is not a smart thing. And you're going to present evidence to that. I will say that when I was in high school and smoking, I did not like being high at all. I did it because my friends did it. So it was peer pressure. And I left it behind and didn't touch it for decades
mhm,
until my own father had asked me to help him with his pancreatic cancer diagnosis. And he was having a lot of pain and on a fentanyl patch. And he hated the fentanyl patch, he detested it.
yeah.
And at that point in time, it was not legal in Wisconsin where he was. It was tolerated, but not legal. And
The
I had,
marijuana wasn't legal, but the fentanyl patch was.
but the
Just to
fentanyl
clarify.
patch
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
And that's, that is so, it is infuriating. So let's hook people on a pharmaceutical drug that alters their mind, but not a natural source. And that's maddening. That also came up actually in, we took in a young man who worked with my husband just a few years ago. He lived with us for quite a while. He had been a fentanyl addict. He had gotten off of it, and they put him on, I don't remember the name of the drug, but it was a pharmaceutical drug that essentially did the same thing. And that was how he was cured of his fentanyl addiction.
Wow.
Well, we helped him get off of that as well. But this
Right.
is what they do, the powers that be. So we want to get away from the yucky, crappy pharmaceutical garbage, and we'll progress to the point where we see
Right.
where maybe there's a better option that's not toxic and is more natural. So
And one
that's
of the things that I've learned, moving from medical school to nutrition school, that I don't know that people fully understand, is that there may be a point, and I think there, in everyone's life, where they need the pharmaceutical, they need the
Mhm.
intervention of the allopathics. But
Yes.
generally speaking, what people need to understand is that natural herbs are powerful. It's a myth to think that they don't work effectively,
Oh,
and
yes.
that prescription drugs, what happens with them, every single one of them, is that their goal is to inhibit a pathway. That is what every prescription does. And if you can think of it that way, when you take something natural, it enhances a pathway. It moves through the body in its whole form. So food supplements, whole form, they'll move through. But when you take a prescription, it's isolated elements, and so it inhibits pathways, and that's why you have side effects. And
Yeah.
so, another slide, I don't know if you want to show the usage trends. Yes.
Yep.
So this one shows, where it's gone up so much, and the reason they're tracking that is because it actually jumps up much higher after 2020, but that data is hard to find strong evidence based. But 40% of our prisons are filled with people who are on marijuana. And so I don't know how to process that information as an individual. Part of me thinks, oh my gosh, we're dealing with human trafficking, heroin, cocaine, much harder things. That's kind of hard that many people are in prison for it. That, my idea, which you may or may not agree with, is maybe a small amount could be allowed, But if you have 5 pounds, yeah, you should go to jail. You're doing something, you're selling, and you don't have a, you don't have a storefront or the right to do that.
Yeah.
But the usage has gone up so much. And in 2020, in fact, it switched a lot, at least as a quarter of a change now to edibles, because the smoke of the marijuana was hurting and impeding the respiratory issues with COVID. So many
Oh,
people moved
yeah.
over to the edibles. And when you do that transition, like we were saying earlier, it takes longer to get the effect. So I think people started taking in more, and then all of a sudden they get the effect and it's too much. So
Yeah.
it's just the dynamics are interesting to see, but the usage is definitely going up. You can see we've more than doubled since 2000. So in the last 20 years, and it's
Wow.
forecasted to go up even more than that. But those are some
I
of the
imagine.
numbers.
Yeah, I'm sure that after 2020 until 2022, probably it went up significantly from there. And maybe
Mhm.
we'll have those numbers in a year or two. But right now, that's where we stand.
Right, right.
So,
So one of the things that I wanted to kind of see is, where do we stand against the rest of the world? If we could just talk about that. I don't know that there's any slides in there, but just
I,
briefly, just to say, around the world, it's very similar process. What they're doing is, some countries, I think Uruguay is the only one that it's fully legalized to grow it, to sell it, and to have it. Uruguay is a little country on the southeast side of South America. Canada lets you have it for medical and recreational use. But the rest of them are decriminalizing the medical usage, allowing the medical usage. And there's a big debate about the recreational use because people aren't sure what to do. So in Florida right now, as we're going into the voting season, we have an Amendment 3. And this is, therein lies where I think one of your next slides has the business stuff. Let me just briefly speak to what's happening. Is just the same as corn and soy and every other product, is the corporations are getting involved. So, I always want to follow the money professionally. That kind of helps me understand what's going on. So in this case, Monsanto, who we know owns most of the seeds, they've kind of buried themselves up under a German company called Bayer AG, and they are becoming the largest distributors of marijuana. They want to be the only holders of it. And one of the largest stakeholders in the company is George Soros. I mean, if anybody's familiar with that, I just thought that was very interesting
it is.
information, very interesting information. And so as you look at the corporations, they're the ones really pushing the legalization of it. And in Florida, with this amendment, California's already passed it, Colorado's passed it, New York's passed it. I called a friend of mine, I went to college in California, who is a U.S. Marshal. And I asked him, I said, what is your opinion on this? Because we have an amendment coming. Number one, my problem with it is that it is for a specific company. I don't know if I should name them or not, but it's for a specific company. And they are supported by the Monsanto Bayer AG. And they literally are recusing them in the amendment on the Florida Constitution. I don't know how that's even a legal thing, but they've done it in 3 other states. But they paid over $90 million to get it on there. So it's like a corruption that's happening in our corporate, the great, country of America, where you can make money and come here and start your family and do all that, has a downside to it. And the
And we're
downside to me,
talking, and we're talking a constitutional amendment here. We're not
yes,
talking about legalizing or anything with law. We're talking a constitutional
yes,
amendment. It's not
yes,
something that goes away, that changes.
right,
It is the
right.
supreme law.
And so no corporation should have any kind of power within our governmental, jurisdictions and systems. That should not be a part of it. They should completely be separated. So this company has put on there that you use their marijuana, and they are recused of any legal liability if something were to happen. And that is what the amendment is. And it's passed in California and Colorado and New York. And so when I called the U.S. Marshal, and I called, different friends in different states that are in positions to know, they all said, no, do not pass it, because we have legal medical marijuana in Florida. We have shops where you can go get stuff. And it's, if you need it, you can go get it. But when this passes, you allow a company to have the ability to have a monopoly. And then secondly, they don't have any legal liability if something's wrong with that product and it's bad. Like if you get, a bad peanut butter, like happened years ago, or something in the food, you can trace
Or
it back to
something
that
else.
company and they're liable.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you trace it back, then they're not liable. So that to me says no, 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 Amendment 3. But then on top of that, it's just corporations shouldn't be on the Constitution. But so for that, they said the vehicle accidents are shooting through the roof, 20 to 40%, and then the insurance rates are going up, and that's what's happening for between
Wow.
states that's going on. So there is some kind of agenda, and they're pushing through all the states. California, Colorado, New York. Now they're hitting Florida, but it's written in such a way that says freedom. We want freedom for
Yeah.
marijuana, and so people are misled. It's a very misleading amendment. So we'll
Yeah.
see what happens with it. But the interesting thing was that the U.S. Marshal said a lot of teens are having problems when they do this, and so that's kind of the challenge. And I think the corporations owning it and having the seeds. So I'd like to just kind of talk a little bit about the plant so that we can kind of explain that really briefly. If you think that would be worthwhile, yes.
Yes,
And that
definitely.
slide, because there was an Opium Act in 1909 that called it hemp, and it kind of confuses people with the names of it. And so I thought this was a good slide just to kind of break it down for people to understand marijuana, because I get moms coming to me with children having a problem. I have, autism children where they're wanting to get this to help their children, which they can, for medical marijuana. And so you have these spectrums of emotions of what's happening, and nobody's talking the same language. So I want to get us on the same language, which is, the overall plant, there's the flowers and the buds, and that's where they're pulling the oil from that's so potent for tinctures and different things. That's the psychoactive part. Um,
Okay.
the leaves, there's, various usage. The stems, more industrial. The seeds, they're used for the hemp nutrition. And then the oil from that would be the seed oil. But most of it is used more of a resin and the oil from the actual flowers and the buds. So then you move to the center column of the cannabis species. There's really just sativa and indica, and there's a lot of variations between those. One stimulates and one is more of a relaxant, and that's the variants you get to help you sleep or to help you wake up, like for autistic children who don't move and have a problem like getting moving. It's better for them, the sativa, to get them kind of moving. The ruderalis is debatable. Some believe it's more of a subspecies, so I'm just going to leave it at that because there's no concrete evidence on the decision with that. But the chemical compounds are the cannabinoids, which are the THC factors that you all know, the chemical compounds with the varying psychoactive active parts. And then there's the terpenes, the bitters, which are like what you find in IPA and different beer, like different elements that have the bitters that can also be beneficial. And then the flavonoids, which are, the polyphenols, the coloring helps. So those are basically the parts of it and the chemical compounds of the cannabis plant.
Okay. And each part has a place and plays a role.
Right.
But the two main components that are talked about a lot are THC, which is psychoactive, and CBD, and then there's CBB, which
There's
is
the but there's the CBG cannabigerol, which is, still being researched. And then there's the cannabinol, which is just mildly psychoactive. And then there's the CBD, which is non-psychoactive. That's when people are helping with their pain. A lot of
yeah.
that's helping. But the cannabigerol, the CBG, is the one they're finding really anti-inflammatory. But it's so under investigation. There's not enough evidence now, but it really seems to have a neuroprotective properties to it.
Wow.
So in looking at the plant with that, and then the THC is the one responsible for going through your system. So the really interesting thing about all of this is, you have, when they found the poppy plants and the seeds of the poppy plants, that's when they found the opiate receptors in the body, And so in 1964, Gaoni and Mashulam they were searching out and breaking up the cannabis plant. And that's how they found we have this whole endogenous cannabinoid system in our body. So many of you have heard of the vagus nerve, right?
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
connection to the gut and the brain. Well, that is very interconnected with the endogenous cannabinoid system. So, called the endocannabinoid system, because obviously it's a very long name and I get tongue twisted with it all the time. But it is a system that really it's the bridge. The endocannabinoid system is the bridge of the brain to the body. And it's called the bliss receptors. When they discovered it, in 1992, that's when they found the endocannabinoids anandamide. And so because we have depleted our soils, because we're not getting all the nutrients that we're supposed to get,
Hmm.
um, those bliss receptors, because anandamide, the Sanskrit of it means bliss. And so they're actually called bliss receptors because God wanted us to have pleasure in life. I mean, it's
Yes.
supposed to be pleasure. And so when you eat good fats, when you have mineral rich nutrients and foods, you have joy, you have good mood, you have a functioning body the way God designed it to be. And
Yeah.
so when you don't get all the nutrients that you need, when you have offensive nutrients in the air, when you have all this, I'm just going to throw bombs out, particulates, shooting into the skies and cloud seeding. And so you're breathing in aluminum and strontium and barium and all these things. It blunts your bliss receptors. And so when you take some of these plants, it opens it back up. And that's what's happening
Oh.
with the exogenous, if you will, marijuana cannabinoids when they enter into the endogenous part of the body. So, that is what I'm finding with all of this. And the goal is to get to where you clear your body so that it functions with good food and you have the minerals and nutrients that you need, but it doesn't become a disorder. And so
Right.
that's kind of where food and plants can always be. There's a purpose for everything God made. And to find that
Yeah.
right usage is what the goal is.
Yeah. And that's hard. This is not probably what you want next,
This
but
this is fine. That's a good one. Go back to that one because
okay.
that's where I, was talking to Dr. Judy Mikovits, and I said, there's not a lot of really good evidence showing the good of, what the evidence of this of marijuana, because there is basically what this shows you is that it has a great purpose for enhancing. So that's what I was just talking about. It enhances the body. It enhances
Oh, yeah.
what needs to happen in our bodies. And so if it's not functioning right, this shows how it can enhance your mood. It can enhance those receptors the way they're supposed to work naturally. And that's what this exogenous does. Um, and that's the way, if we had all the right foods and we weren't putting, stuff in the environment, then we'd be in a better position, So
Wow.
this shows you how it's all enhanced, which can have a good and a bad side. So the bad side to these findings by Krasinska, and this is like Poland and Arab authors in Iran. That's where I'm finding a lot of good data showing what its purpose is for, because they haven't been taken over by the corporations in those countries yet, just to be very clear. And so you can find studies in those places. And what you see is that, you have to be aware in this country, when you take warfarin or you take anticoagulants and you take those kind of things, whether you're using this recreationally or medically, you need to understand it's going to enhance it, meaning you are at risk of bleeding more because it's going to enhance whatever you're taking, because that's what it does. Which also means if you are, having alcohol, it's going to enhance that depressant. So just be mindful of what you're doing, because it's very effective on its own. But if you take it alongside something, it can help it work better. So just be careful and be aware of what you're taking
Okay. That
together
makes
with it.
sense. That
Yeah,
makes sense. And that's very, very interesting.
right.
So,
So I don't know what else you have in there that we can kind of go through.
we've got the nutrition.
Yeah, do we have the concentration slide where it goes across, where you can see the green bars that go horizontal? I'm hoping we have that. The horizontal one? Yes, that
That
one.
one.
That's what you were talking about in the beginning that's changed significantly.
Yeah.
So in 1960, when my Indian grandmother was smoking her peace pipe every once in a while, I'm
I love
pretty
that
sure
story.
I'm pretty sure this is what she was doing. But it's 2% THC inside the leaves and the flowers that are being used. Okay. and
Okay.
those flower buds that you're using, it's 2%. You move up to the 1980s, you're getting 10%. You move up to 2020 at the, you get into the end, that's 30% THC within the same flower
Wow.
buds. And so what people were trying in the 60s and Woodstock and, and my great grandmother and doing all those things today is what that's huge. It's a huge difference.
From 2 to 30%.
It's huge. I'm
Wow.
not a mathematician, but it's a huge increase. It's what is that? I don't know, 100, 200, 300% more. It's a lot.
Yeah.
So that's why our kids that are trying it are having a problem with it. That's why because the dosage needs to be a lot smaller, or we need to go back to getting organic. And I will say, I did find when I was looking for my son to try the tincture, which it did not work for him. But I know
Mhm.
many, many people personally that their child who was autistic, functioning to a level where they would do the tincture. They are now driving and they were able to go to college. And I'm very jealous, God forgive me, but I'm very jealous that that didn't work for us because I wanted it too desperately. And I did the tincture so that it didn't, so that it wasn't, so that it was something that we could manage in dosage for him. And,
Yeah.
because the smoking, I wasn't sure how you even managed that part of it. So we did the tincture and it did not work for him. But, there's a company, Tikkun Olam is the only one I found. And if there's other ones, comment, like you guys share it, put all that information
Yeah.
out there. But Tikkun Olam, Tikkun Olam, Olam, was an organic company that you can go to a dispensary and get, a clean, so that it's not so high. And when you do the
Yeah.
dosage, because you
Well,
have to be really careful with that, what's
you
happening.
do. Now, obviously, at this point, people know I'm not opposed to it, so I'm going to step out on a limb here. Um, I do use gummies several times a week to help me not fall asleep, but stay asleep and to calm my mind down because I always have 50 things I'm trying to figure out and plan out. And how am I going to get this done and that done? So I have a lot of trouble staying asleep.
Hmm. A lot of people do, actually.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes if I get to bed very late, I have a hard time falling asleep, but I have a hard time staying asleep. And I know all the things to do to manage that. And I do. And I still wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning.
Mhm.
So I often, in particular, when I know I need a good night's sleep, like if I'm going to be speaking or driving or something, I will use gummies. And I get gummies that are supposed to be about 10 milligrams, and I don't eat the whole thing. If I'm feeling semi okay, I'll eat half of it. If I'm really stressed out, I'll eat most of it, but I don't do 10 milligrams. And I will say that if I get up during the night after that is kicked in, I do feel it in my head, and I don't like that. So
Hmm.
that's why I use it for sleep,
Right.
not for other things. I did recently use it for intense pain, in which case 2 or 3 times, this was the week before last, um, I did use half of a gummy just to get past the pain, and it worked.
I was just about to ask that, because when you look at the statistics of it, one of the things that I presented, and I even inquired at the conference in the audience, just for
Yeah, I
people
remember.
to feel free. Like, I wanted to see how we compared, but there's about 55 million users in the United States of America, and that's it's about 20% of our population. So 1 in 5 use it. So we have either too much stress, we have nutrient depletions. So there's a lot of things happening, because
Yeah,
historically, if you were to go back to really like living off the grid, like truly the way they did, it was
yeah,
added in salad. It was smoked on a peace pipe periodically. And so, that's where you see people, we have issues. We have stuff where we have so much going on. There is a lot of anxiety. And I mean, I work in a
yeah,
clinic and see patients every week. And this is a problem. And for some people, they can eat earlier so that they don't
mhm,
wake up and have the blood sugar change in the middle of the night. And some
yeah,
people, they really just need the marijuana to kind of get through what they're going through.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I found in the evidence that was overwhelming to me is that, and this is conjecture, I'm probably going to publish it, through my doctorate and through my thesis, moving through this, because there's a huge gap in the public perception in the medical community. There really is this huge gap in there. And
Yeah.
that's where I feel like I can kind of share being a mom of autistic children and helping foster kids, and, seeing where, just like we've said, how it can be used correctly and not used. And a lot of the evidence shows for short term and for dealing with really acute issues,
Yeah.
and, having high anxiety for some things, or high pain, neuropathy,
Yeah.
any kind of that, it is very effective and very beneficial. And then the challenge with chronic use is that it does have, I'm going to call it this, there's no name. It's just, this is my conjecture of what I'm calling it and what I'm going to publish on, which to me, it seems like there is this saturation point. And this saturation point where people can have too much. And when they reach that saturation point, all the studies are showing how you can become, have psycho issues, become bipolar, become schizophrenic, and all those things can happen. And so my question and my research has been, why? Why does it work for some kids and not some? Why does it work for some people and not others? And that huge divide in that gap is where I'm trying to research, and there's no data. So just digging in, I mean, I have spent at least 150, 200 hours, probably more. I don't even know. There's so many hours on this, trying to figure out, why is there that gap? The best way I can explain it in my language to make sense is, it seems truly that there is a saturation point where you need it. It's really good. And then you flip. And when you you get to that point where you're paranoid all around you, or you're bipolar, like, trust your friends, trust your community. And they say, hey, you've met your mark. That's it. Same thing with alcohol.
Yeah.
It's no different, because, women can have one glass, men can have two. But I have a girlfriend who, she can drink me under the table, and she's in the best shape. She's Russian. She can have 5 glasses. And I'm like, I would be under the table, like, I couldn't handle it. So I can have, one glass of wine, and that's, I'm good. My stomach's good, as the Bible says, one glass for the stomach. So there's this saturation point that varies for people. So you have to be very mindful of what that is for you, because we are individuals. We do have different levels of metals in our bodies. We have different SNPs, polymorphisms. Some of us have MTHFR. Some of us have super tasters. Some of us have Indian in us. Some have more European in us. So all those, some of us are, living on the farm in Pennsylvania and don't have all those EMFs and stuff. And some of us are right in the city, and we're loaded up with it. So you just have to pay attention and know where you are personally, and have, people around you that can tell you, hey, hold off. You need to take a breather from this, because we're all just trying to be healthy.
And if you're deciding to give it a try for a particular reason, start small. Now, I hadn't touched it in decades, and to help my father, I hooked up with someone who had a medical card for. Okay, I got to be careful here.
Yeah, well, that you got that for your dad.
I got it
worked
for
that
my
through
dad.
with your dad. Yeah,
And it was tincture, but
that's what we tried for my son too.
okay. And I didn't care for the tincture, actually.
Mm.
I tried it so that I could tell my dad. So dosage, again, it goes back to dosage. I needed to know how much to tell my dad and how it was going to affect him. And I knew nothing. This is 8 years ago.
Right.
I purchased the wrong type. I purchased sativa. I didn't realize that there was a difference between sativa and indica. So I tried it, thinking I'd report to him in the morning and figure out a dosage, knowing he's different than me, but have some baseline.
We're the same genome, so that helps.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was awake all night long.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there really is a difference.
Yeah.
And I only use indica for sleep. And it's,
Right.
as I said, it's not every day, but I do use it. And I sent it and some other things for him to try with instructions in the mail. And I didn't use my mailing address. I was petrified that I would get caught and it was going to come back to me and I'd be in so much trouble. So, but as it turned out, he actually died just a few days, either right before or right after. I guess it was right before.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And
So,
one of the things that's interesting about it, is that you have a unidirectional process with, the way things move throughout your body, your neurotransmitters. And
yeah.
when you take these, it actually moves backwards. And that's what causes it to kind of flush out, if you will, your nervous system, the way that it usually functions. And so
Okay.
that backwards retrograde or reverse signaling is what they call it, because that synapse that happens and binds receptors, it usually is a one directional. But whenever you're using any kind of plant that has a psychoactive effect, it moves the opposite direction. And that's what kind of, it's almost like, I don't know, I'm just going to say this word, it's almost like an enema. Like it moves it back
Yeah.
up and kind of flushes out, and it allows a release, like an altered release of the neurotransmitters. And so there are people who can use it just for a little bit and it's just enough to make a difference, and then they're fine and they can move on with it. And there's some that may need a little bit longer. So I mean, I'm still studying it. I'm not resolved on anything. I just know that there's a ton of information and a huge gap on it. But
Yeah.
I definitely don't want to close without saying some really cool nutritional things that I have
Yeah.
found in research that work. So, big thing is, if you use it too much and you reach that chronic phase, it can harm your short-term memory. Dr. Almond, who works with the brain and looks at the brain, says that it can actually lead to dementia. It can lead to those type issues. It's very serious. So that's why I tell people, don't just use it recreationally and keep going. Use it when you need it, if it works for you, and then don't,
Yeah.
and
It's
take a
medicine.
break. Yes, take a break. Don't take it all the time. So it does. And if you're under 24, your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, you run a much greater risk of being addicted to it. And people will say it's not addictive, but it is. They've done the research long enough now to see that they call it a cannabinoid use disorder, which basically means your first time, one in three people are then addicted just first time. So you have to be very careful with it. And then it can increase your anxiety, paranoia, we've talked about, and impaired reaction time. So don't go driving or working in heavy equipment.
It's just like drinking while drunk.
Right, exactly. And so Dr. Almond really talks about how it reduces your blood flow to your hippocampus in your brain. And so if you use it a long time, it will shrink it. And that's what causes the dementia. So I wanted to say that because your brain cannot recover from oxidative damage as well as other organs in your body. So I just want to say
that also explains, many of us know people who were big into using drugs, getting high young, and a lot frequently. And I know a couple, and it seems like they just never grew up.
Right.
Well, if you start using it when you're young, when you're a teenager, and you use it frequently, it's going to arrest maturity. It's going to arrest brain development.
And those are my questions with all the kids with autism. And that's where I hate the fact of time telling us, that's at the expense of these kids. But, 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds and 14-year-old autistic kids are having tincture and it's helping them. Does that mean that they're going to have issues later on after using you're doing 0.15 to 0.25, tincture every day? Is that going to do that, to our kids that have autism? So, I mean, I have a lot of questions that are still unanswered. But we talked earlier, like the blood thinners, the alcohol, be mindful of that, the drug-induced nutrient depletions that occur. And then I wanted to talk nutrition because I think that's huge. I want to make sure that we walk away saying, if you are on marijuana, it's helping you so much. Your endocannabinoid system is probably deficient of omega-3. So if you will take omega-3, fish oils, or eat a lot of wild caught salmon, you can do that. And you can take like curcumin, turmeric, ginger. Let me see what else in the, there's a lot of studies. And if you take all of these things, you will repair yourself, and then you may not need to take the marijuana to help with your mood and your anxiety and your sleep and those things. So it could be a deficiency, you know.
Right.
And so that's an option. And the other thing that is important, that I don't know if you have the slide, but we talked about how it affects the hippocampus. Right there in the front, right before your frontal cortex, is the nucleus accumbens. And the way that that's written in the medical world is NAC. We breezed through that one. Yep, it's not in there. So it's basically the nucleus accumbens is a little part, right, like in the between here and between here, and it's right behind your prefrontal cortex, and it's NAC. So what's funny to me is how aligned medical is with our bodies. So take NAC and acetylcysteine. And they have found that to be overwhelming evidence to help those who are addicted to it, who absolutely feel like they have to have it to get better. So take the NAC, the N-acetylcysteine, and then take the omega-3, and take, the turmeric, and take, those, ginger, and take those things and see how that does. And then try to go off of the marijuana for a while. So at least your body can determine it. It may make your endocannabinoid system work better, having all those things. And then you may not need to have the marijuana as much, or you may not have to have it at all. It may be more of a periodic thing. So those are nutrient depletions that happen that, if you take the NAC, you're low on that. And your endocannabinoid system is low on omega-3 deficiencies. That's what the studies are. There's not a lot of them, but the ones that I found are saying this, and it's very effective to take NAC. So for all the moms out there who their kids are having problems, this is what I'm recommending that you do to help them get over the dependency for it, so that they're not, because it does tend to make them very lazy and not motivated. And so if you give them the NAC and give them the omega-3, you'll give them the nutrients that they need, and then they won't have the dependency for the marijuana, and maybe it can help them move along.
Do you think we recommend the fermented cod liver oil, which would include the omega-3s?
Yes. That would be an excellent source for that.
Where do we find NAC or NAC?
You can find it in any store. I mean, the cleaner versions, obviously, you can get for your, like at our clinic, we sell them. It's, it was one of the things during COVID people were talking about to take.
Yep.
It's N-acetylcysteine. So you can find it anywhere. I would just highly recommend that you get it from like a chiropractor's office, a clinic that has food supplements, because you're actually getting that product. Because, sometimes you just don't know what you're getting from, the big corporate stores. So you want to get it from, better sourced medical, like Pure Encapsulation. They're probably a better choice that is more readily available for people. I would think that they would have a NAC. So that, that would certainly help to empower, all of the moms out there and the individuals that may want to see if it's just a depletion, a nutrient deficiency. So take the cod liver oil and take the NAC and see how you do. And you may not need as much marijuana or need it at all.
Yeah. To not need it at all would be nice, but I'm thankful for everything that God put on the earth for our well-being.
Yes.
And I've always viewed this as a natural medicine. But again, it can be abused, and we need to be mindful of that. Well, Mandy, do you have any parting words or any suggestions before we close? Any books that we should read, or any other ideas? I have a book. I'll tell you, I didn't bring it up, and it's not one that I necessarily recommend. Its intent is actually recreational, but a friend of mine had told me about it, and I wanted to make my own preparations. The only trouble with making your own preparations is that you really don't know dosage, because you don't know how strong something is. But I have a funny cookbook for that, so that I could get ideas, so that I could have control. Here in Virginia, the recreational use has been decriminalized. It's legal for people to grow, I think, up to 5 plants per person. I don't grow any. I have no desire to, but I know people who do. And I trust them more than I trust picking it up off the street where it might be laced with fentanyl. And I don't want to buy the pharmaceutical grade. I don't want to feed that giant.
Right.
Yeah.
So it froze up for me. So, I want to answer the question that you had, because I wasn't sure where we were or what was happening. And I know that you're getting ready to close out, but, I would say, back to the great wisdoms of our grandparents and Weston A. Price Foundation, and as a clinical nutritionist who, moved out of the medical arena and came to nutrition and found great success with my son, I would very much appeal to, everyone, as seeing the benefits as you have too, to, eat really good fats, and eat it in the portion of grass-fed, grass-finished animals from farmers who just love the earth and love their animals, and, get your proteins, do your ferments, eat wild-caught fish, and then take your cod liver oil, with the butter. I prefer it with the butter, but I love that version of it. And then, to take, as we all do need extra supplements, to try, if you do have children or if you are on it, try the NAC and the omega-3s and see if it kind of moves you out of the need for it so much if you are using it chronically and have had it for years, just so that your body can get a break from that, and just see if you can get the replenishment that your body needs the way, that God made it. So, and then if you do have it and you're growing it, I think putting it in a salad is a clean way to do it, juicing it,
and now the only trouble with that, though, Mandy, is that it has to be heated in order to release the active factors. So they're bound in the plant until there's heat.
But it's interesting to note that the juicing and the salad is something very common that I've read over and over in other countries that they do. So there is some kind of effect to it, maybe when it heats up in the acid in your stomach. But, that's something that they do a lot in the Middle East, in Poland and those countries. So, where they said it does have an impact, and it's just, so I don't know God's, full plan for it all, but I know that, everything has a purpose, and, managing that to make sure that you do have as best diet as you can, and then take the things that you need to help you be in the best health you can be. And, for the mamas out there that are trying to help with their kiddos, take the NAC, give them the NAC and the omega-3. That'll help a lot. So those are my, current standings in this research.
Good. And you'll let me know when you learn more or hear more.
Absolutely.
We'd love to learn more. I'm very interested in natural medicine as a whole. And so this is fascinating to me. I'm so thankful for your time. And Mandy, where can people find you?
I am not heavily involved on social media, but I am on Instagram mostly, if I'm going to post, under Mandy Blume, when it's not appropriate to put it on My Love, which is with the foster kids for real food recovery, where we, work on helping kids with, managing all their trauma and getting through all of that. So those are the two places I can be found, probably mostly on Instagram.
And Real Food Recovery. It is not on my bookshelf because it's I haven't unpacked all the way yet from the conference, and it was on the conference bookshelf on the God's Good table. So well, Mandy, thank you very much once again, and everyone, thank you for listening in. In the next few weeks, we have some interesting interviews coming up. We are pre-recording because I will be in Europe, primarily Germany, and visiting my grandchildren and helping out. So somehow 3:00 becomes 9 p.m. bedtime with 3 little kids. Not a good time to be recording. So next week, we're going to put up an interview that I recorded today with Laura Vellante about the GAPS diet and gut healing. And so that is the next thing coming up. And I think you'll find that very interesting as well. And I have a couple more lining up, including a visit to Natasha Campbell McBride's farm in England. So I'll be bringing that to you as well. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. please, we ask you to please like, subscribe, and share. You hear that with every show that you listen to on YouTube and every podcast, but it really does help us a lot. And if you'd care to, you can buy us a glass of milk. There's a link down below for that, and that would help for us to keep our overhead going. So with that said, I'm going to say thank you. Goodbye, everyone, and have a great week. Until next time.